Hello, my friends. I hope this recording finds you safe and warm today. How are you holding up? I hope the cold hasn't been too hard on your joints, and that your coffee tastes just right this morning. Sitting here, listening to the winter wind brush softly against the window, I found myself thinking about how thin the line between safety and fear can truly be, and how quickly an ordinary night can change. Today's story is about a young teacher who believed she had finally made it home, only to be cornered by three drunk bikers who mistook her fear for entertainment and her silence for weakness. But it is also a story about a 42-year-old veteran in a worn green jacket, a man carrying old battles in silence, and his loyal German shepherd who stepped forward when it mattered most. It is a story about courage showing up unannounced, about protection found in the darkest moments, and about the quiet reminder that good still exists in this world. If stories of strength, compassion, and the bond between humans and animals speak to your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a little hope today. Now settle in. Snow fell softly over Denver, muffling the city beneath a gray winter sky, as cold air crept through concrete walls and settled into every quiet corner of the night. Lily Parker stepped out of her aging sedan and pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, her breath blooming white in the air. At 27, Lily was slender and slightly taller than average, with a narrow frame shaped more by long hours standing in classrooms than by any thought of fitness. Her light brown hair, usually neatly tied for work, had slipped loose tonight, strands escaping around her pale face and clinging to her scarf. Her skin carried the faint dryness of winter and fluorescent lighting, and her eyes, soft hazel, thoughtful, and often tired, held the gentle patience of someone who spent her days explaining the same lesson 5 different ways to children who needed more than words. Lily was a primary school teacher at a public elementary school on the east side of the city, the kind who stayed late to clean chalk dust from desks and quietly bought supplies with her own money. That habit, giving more than she received, had shaped her into someone kind, but also someone who apologized too often and trusted too easily. The parking lot outside her apartment complex was nearly empty, its cracked asphalt glazed with thin ice. Lily balanced a canvas tote against her hip, the bag heavy with ungraded worksheets and a children's book she planned to reread before bed. The parent-teacher meeting had run long, filled with concerns, complaints, and polite smiles that hid exhaustion on both sides of the table. All Lily wanted now was the warmth of her small apartment, a cup of tea, and silence. Halfway to the entrance, she heard laughter. It wasn't loud at first, just a rough, slurred sound that didn't belong to the stillness of the night. Lily's shoulders tensed before her mind could catch up. She told herself it was nothing, that Denver was a city full of noise and strangers. Still, her steps quickened. Behind her, 3 motorcycles were parked crookedly near the curb, their chrome dulled by road salt and neglect. Leaning against them were 3 men, all wearing worn leather jackets patched with faded symbols and oil stains. They were younger than Lily expected, likely in their early 30s, but their faces were already hardened by excess and poor choices. One was tall and broad with a shaved head and a thick neck, his beard uneven and scraggly as if trimmed without care. Another was leaner, with sunken cheeks, greasy dark hair spilling from beneath a helmet he hadn't bothered to remove, and restless eyes that flicked toward Lily with sharp interest. The third was stockier, red-faced, his nose swollen from either old fights or heavy drinking, a bottle dangling loosely from his fingers. The smell of alcohol reached Lily before they did, strong, sour, unmistakable. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called, his voice dragging the word out as if tasting it. Pretended she hadn't heard. She kept walking, keys clenched between her fingers, her heart beginning to beat faster. The glass doors of the building slid open with a mechanical sigh, and Lily slipped inside, relief flooding her chest. The lobby was empty, the security desk unattended, The overhead lights dimmed to save electricity. She crossed the space quickly and pressed the elevator button, then stopped herself. The stairs would be faster. She didn't want to be trapped in a metal box tonight. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her boots echoing sharply, and emerged onto the 3rd-floor hallway. The corridor stretched long and narrow, beige walls scuffed from decades of tenants moving in and out. Overhead lights flickering faintly. It smelled faintly of old carpet, cleaning chemicals, and something damp that never quite went away. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, unsteady. Too close. Lily turned just as the stairwell door swung open behind her. The 3 men spilled into the hallway, their laughter bouncing off the walls, amplified by the confined space. They moved faster now, blocking the path to her apartment, their shadows stretching grotesquely under the buzzing lights. "Relax," the tall one said, spreading his arms slightly as if to appear friendly, though his eyes were anything but. "We just want to talk." Lily backed away instinctively until her shoulders pressed against the cold wall. Her breath came shallow and quick. "Please," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. "Let me pass." The man with the bottle laughed and took a step closer, invading her space. "Why you in such a hurry, teacher?" he slurred, though she had never told them what she did. His hand brushed her coat, fingers catching the fabric. Fear exploded through her body. Lily shoved his hand away, but the movement only encouraged them. The lean man grabbed her sleeve and yanked, the sound of tearing fabric loud in the hallway. Another hand fisted the collar of her coat, pulling it open. Cold air rushed against her skin, and Lily screamed, once, before panic stole the sound from her throat. Her thoughts fractured. Images of her students flashed through her mind. Missing teeth. Crooked handwriting. Small hands waving goodbye at the end of the day. She thought of her mother calling every Sunday, of the unfinished essays in her bag, of the life she had built so carefully and quietly. A terrifying certainty settled in her chest that none of it mattered now. This was how people vanished, she thought. Not with noise or witnesses, but in places everyone passed through and no one really saw. Lily struggled, her nails scraping uselessly against leather and denim, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The hallway seemed to close in around her, the flickering lights blurring through tears. Somewhere deep inside, a small, defiant part of her refused to believe this was the end, but it had no idea how to fight what stood in front of her. And then, at the far end of the corridor, the elevator chimed. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, and the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Ryan Cole stepped out first, filling the narrow space with a quiet, immovable presence. At 42, he was built solid rather than large, his height average but his posture unmistakably disciplined, shoulders squared by years of carrying weight that had nothing to do with muscle. His face was angular and weathered, the planes of his cheekbones sharp beneath a short, neatly kept beard already threaded with gray. Deep-set blue-gray eyes surveyed the corridor without hurry, eyes that had learned long ago to read danger before it announced itself. The green jacket he wore was an old military field coat, faded and scuffed at the cuffs, the fabric softened by time and weather. It wasn't decorative, it was practical, chosen by a man who valued function over comfort and habit over fashion. Ryan had left the service years earlier, but the war had not left him. A roadside explosion overseas had taken 2 men from his unit and etched caution into his bones, reshaping him into someone who spoke less and watched more. At his side stood Diesel. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, fully grown, with a powerful frame that spoke of strength without excess. His coat was a rich blend of black and tan, thick and well-kept, with a faint scar along his left shoulder where shrapnel had once grazed him during training exercises overseas. Diesel's ears stood erect, pivoting slightly as he assessed the scene, and his amber eyes locked onto the men at the far end of the hallway with an intelligence that felt uncomfortably human. He wore a simple black harness, worn but sturdy, and moved with controlled precision, every step measured. Diesel was not a pet in the ordinary sense. He had been trained, retired early after a hip injury, and bonded to Ryan in a way that didn't require words. Ryan took in the scene in seconds. Lily pressed against the wall, her coat torn, fear raw on her face. 3 men blocking her path, bodies angled forward, breath heavy with alcohol and entitlement. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. Experience had taught him that sudden movement often escalated what silence could diffuse. "Step away from her," he said calmly, his voice low and even, carrying more authority than volume ever could. The tallest biker scoffed, trying to laugh it off, but the sound wavered. "Mind your business, old man." Ryan's gaze didn't leave him. "It became my business the moment you touched her." Diesel moved then, only half a step forward, placing his body squarely between Lily and the men. His head lowered slightly, shoulders rolling forward, muscles tightening beneath his coat. A deep growl vibrated from his chest, not loud, not frantic, but steady and unmistakable. It wasn't a warning meant to scare. It was a statement. The hallway seemed smaller now. The men shifted uneasily, instinct overriding bravado. Alcohol dulled their judgment, but it couldn't erase the primal understanding of a predator ready to act. The lean biker glanced toward the stairwell, calculating distance. The man with the bottle tightened his grip, then loosened it, uncertainty flickering across his flushed face. "You gonna sick your dog on us?" one muttered, attempting bravado. Ryan's expression didn't change. "I won't have to." Diesel's growl deepened, a low resonance that seemed to crawl up the walls and settle under the men's skin. His eyes never left the nearest biker, tracking the smallest shift in weight, the twitch of a hand. Lily felt it then, not just fear, but something else. Space. For the first time since the hallway had closed in on her, she could breathe. The tallest biker took a step back. "This ain't worth it," he said, more to his companions than to Ryan. "Let's go." They retreated slowly at first, eyes never leaving Diesel, then faster as pride gave way to survival. One spat a curse onto the carpet. Another hurled a threat over his shoulder, thin and unconvincing. "This isn't over." Ryan watched until the stairwell door slammed shut behind them. Only then did he relax his shoulders slightly. Diesel's growl faded, replaced by a steady, alert stance, though he remained positioned in front of Lily until Ryan nodded once. "You're safe," Ryan said, turning toward her at last. His voice softened, the steel replaced by something gentler. "They're gone. For now." Lily slid down the wall until she was crouched, hands shaking. She nodded, unable to find words. Diesel approached slowly, his posture easing, and stopped just close enough to offer warmth without crowding her. His presence was grounding, solid. Ryan glanced down the hallway once more, committing details to memory. The flickering lights, the blind spots, the distance to the exits. He had learned never to assume danger disappeared simply because it retreated. "They may come back," he said quietly, not to frighten her, but because truth mattered. "If they do, they'll find we're prepared." Lily looked up at him, the first fragile thread of hope pulling through her fear. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft thud, sealing the moment. Outside, snow continued to fall, indifferent to what had nearly happened, and to what was now set in motion. Morning arrived quietly over Denver, pale sunlight reflecting off snowbanks and turning last night's fear into something sharper rather than softer. Lily Parker woke after only a few hours, restless sleep, her body stiff and her thoughts looping back to the hallway again and again. The torn seam of her coat lay folded on the chair beside her bed, like evidence she couldn't look away from. She moved through her small apartment slowly, reheating yesterday's coffee and forcing herself to breathe until the shaking in her hands eased. By mid-morning, she had made a decision. Gratitude, she believed, mattered. So did courage, even when it came wrapped in uncertainty. She baked banana bread from an old recipe her mother had given her during her first year of teaching. The kind of simple comfort food meant to say thank you without too many words. Lily changed into a clean sweater, brushed her hair into a loose ponytail, and stepped into the hallway with the bread still warm in her hands. The corridor looked harmless in daylight. Beige carpet vacuumed, lights steady, no sign of last night's menace. That was what unsettled her most. Evil, she was learning, didn't leave fingerprints where people expected them. Ryan Cole opened his door after the second knock. In daylight, he looked different than he had under flickering lights. His face was calmer, less severe, though the lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of long vigilance. He wore a plain gray thermal shirt, sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and faint scars that hinted at past violence without advertising it. His beard was neatly trimmed, his dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. When he saw Lily standing there with the bread, he paused, then gave a small nod that passed for a smile. "You didn't have to do that," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I wanted to," Lily replied. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Ryan's apartment was sparse and orderly, furnished with the kind of practical restraint that came from moving often. A single couch, a wooden table scarred by use, boots lined neatly by the door. Diesel lay near the window, sunlight catching the sheen of his black and tan coat. He lifted his head as Lily entered, tail thumping once against the floor in recognition. In the morning light, Lily noticed the faint stiffness in his hind leg when he stood, subtle but unmistakable. It made his alertness feel earned rather than intimidating. They spoke quietly over coffee. Lily thanked Ryan again, stumbling over the words she hadn't managed the night before. Ryan listened without interrupting, his attention steady, eyes thoughtful rather than distant. When she finished, he nodded once. "What happened wasn't random," he said. "Men like that don't escalate unless they think they can get away with it." Before Lily could respond, a knock sounded at the door, sharp and confident. Ryan opened it to reveal Martha Collins, their neighbor, from down the hall. At 72, Martha was small and upright, her posture surprisingly straight for her age. Her silver hair was set neatly in soft curls, and she wore a floral cardigan over pressed slacks, as if she treated each day like an appointment with the world. Her eyes were bright and observant, missing very little. She had lived in the building longer than anyone else and carried herself like its unofficial guardian. "I smelled baking," Martha said cheerfully. Then her gaze sharpened when she saw Lily. "And I heard about last night." They invited her in. Martha settled into a chair with the careful grace of someone who had learned how to move without rushing. As they talked, her cheerful tone shifted to something more serious. "I didn't want to be a busybody," she said, folding her hands. "But I've seen things. A rusted pickup parked across the street for hours the last 2 nights. Same one. And yesterday morning, one of those men was in the lobby pretending to check the mail. He wasn't reading envelopes. He was reading names." The room grew quiet. Lily felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Ryan stood. "Show me your door," he said. They walked to Lily's apartment together. In the bright hallway, the damage was easy to miss, but Ryan crouched, examining the lock plate closely. Thin scratches marred the metal, fresh and uneven. Someone had tried to force it. Diesel stepped forward, nose close to the seam of the door. His body stiffened, ears angling forward, a low sound vibrating briefly in his chest before he stopped. The message was clear. "They were here," Ryan said. "Recently." Fear surged again, but something else rose with it. Resolve. Lily squared her shoulders. "What do I do?" she asked. Ryan didn't hesitate. He retrieved tools from his apartment and reinforced the strike plate with longer screws, his movements efficient and practiced. He spoke as he worked, explaining without condescension. Awareness buys you seconds. Distance buys you options. Time buys you survival. He showed her where to stand, how to listen, how to keep space between herself and anyone who tried to close in. It wasn't about fighting. It was about refusing to freeze. Lily listened, memorizing each word. Her fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, becoming something she could hold rather than something that held her. When Ryan finished, he tested the door, then stepped back. "This will slow them down," he said, "and slowing them down matters." Diesel moved to Lily's side and leaned gently against her leg, warm and solid. Lily rested a hand on his head, grounding herself in the simple fact of his presence. Outside, the snow began to fall again, light and steady. Whatever had followed her into the hallway had not vanished with daylight. But Lily was no longer facing it alone. The third night arrived without warning, wrapped in a silence that felt deliberate. Denver was buried under another light snowfall, but the storm had nothing to do with what came next. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the power in the building died. Not flickered, cut. The hum of appliances vanished. Hallway lights blinked out, and the familiar sounds of the old structure fell into an unnatural quiet that pressed against the ears. Inside her apartment, Lily Parker froze. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint glow of the city bleeding in through the window. Her heart began to pound, each beat loud in her chest. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, memory took over. Ryan's voice from earlier echoed clearly in her mind. Hide. Lock. Create time. She moved quickly but carefully, shoes silent on the floor, and retreated into the bathroom, the only room without windows facing the hallway. She shut the door, turned the lock, and crouched beside the tub, her back against cold porcelain. Her hands shook as she typed a message on her phone. The screen dimmed to its lowest setting. They cut the power. I hear them outside. She hit send and held the phone tight, as if it were a lifeline. Outside her door, the first sound came softly. A scrape, metal against metal. Then another, slower, more deliberate. Someone testing resistance. The reinforced lock groaned, wood protesting under pressure. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the urge to cry, focusing instead on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Seconds mattered. In Ryan's apartment, across the hall and one unit down, Diesel was already on his feet. The German shepherd's body had gone rigid the instant the power failed. His ears twitched independently, tracking sounds no human could isolate. The faint shuffle of boots, the whispered coordination of men who had come prepared. Ryan rose from his chair without turning on a light. He didn't need one. The darkness felt familiar, almost comfortable, like the moments before breach in places far from home. Ryan moved with controlled urgency, strapping on his jacket, checking Diesel's harness by touch alone. His face was calm, but his jaw was set hard, the old instinct fully awake now. These weren't drunk men anymore. This was intent, planning, the kind that ended badly if underestimated. He didn't open his front door. Instead, Ryan slipped onto the narrow balcony outside his apartment. Cold air bit into his skin, snow crunching faintly beneath his boots. The building's layout came back to him clearly. Adjacent balconies separated by a waist-high divider, old and cracked. Risky, but expected was worse. He guided Diesel forward, placing a steady hand at the dog's chest, and murmured a single word. Diesel moved first, silent and fluid, clearing the divider with ease. Ryan followed moments later, landing lightly despite his size. Inside Lily's apartment, the front door finally gave way with a sharp crack, wood splintered inward. Heavy footsteps flooded the space, boots stomping across the floor with confidence born from numbers. A flashlight snapped on, its beam slicing through darkness. "Search everything," a voice growled. The leader. Older than the others, late 30s perhaps, tall and wiry, with sharp features and a scar cutting through his right eyebrow. His hair was pulled back tight, his movements controlled. This was not his first intrusion. "She's here. I heard her." The bathroom door rattled as a hand tested the handle. Then chaos arrived from the wrong direction. Diesel burst through the living room like a shadow given form. He didn't bark. He launched. 80 pounds of muscle collided with the nearest man, knocking him flat before he could shout. The impact was violent and sudden, the kind that stole breath and thought alike. The flashlight clattered across the floor, spinning wildly and throwing the room into strobing confusion. Ryan followed immediately, moving through the opening with ruthless efficiency. He struck the second man, short, thick-necked, wielding a crowbar, with a precise blow to the shoulder, disarming him before he could swing. The man went down hard, gasping, shock replacing aggression. The leader reacted fast, too fast. He lunged for the bathroom door and kicked it in with a snarl of desperation. Lily screamed as he dragged her out, one arm locked around her chest, the other hand flashing a knife into the dim light. The blade pressed against her throat, cold and unforgiving. "Back off!" the man shouted, panic bleeding through his command. "Or she dies!" The room froze. Ryan stopped 10 feet away, hands open, body angled sideways. Diesel stood at his left, muscles coiled, teeth bared, eyes locked on the knife hand. A low growl vibrated from his chest, the sound controlled but lethal. Lily's vision tunneled. Her heart thundered so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The leader's grip tightened. The knife nicked her skin, a thin line of warmth following. Then she remembered. The body has weak points. Ryan's words surfaced with startling clarity. "Create space." She acted before fear could stop her. Lily drove her heel down as hard as she could onto the top of the man's foot. Bone crunched. The scream that tore from him was raw and involuntary. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second. That second was everything. "Diesel!" Ryan commanded. The German Shepherd launched upward, jaws clamping onto the man's forearm, the knife hand with crushing force. The blade clattered to the floor. Ryan closed the distance instantly, slamming the man to the ground and pinning him with practiced precision. In moments, it was over. The leader lay restrained, groaning, the fight drained from his body. Silence returned, broken only by heavy breathing. Ryan turned to Lily, checking her quickly, gently. The cut was shallow. She was shaking, but standing. Alive. Outside, snow continued to fall, indifferent. Inside, darkness had failed to claim its prize. Sirens cut through the early morning quiet as the first patrol cars slid to a stop outside the building, their red and blue lights washing the snow-dusted brick in restless color. Lily Parker stood wrapped in a borrowed blanket near her doorway, the adrenaline finally ebbing and leaving behind a deep, trembling exhaustion. Her sweater clung to her like a reminder of how close she had come to disappearing into the dark. Ryan Cole stood a few steps away, shoulders squared, hands relaxed at his sides, Diesel seated at his heel, with the calm composure of a guardian who had completed his task but remained vigilant. The police moved quickly and methodically, voices low, boots echoing down the hallway that only hours earlier had been a battlefield of shadows. The first officer through the door was Sergeant Alan Brooks, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s, with a weathered face and a trimmed mustache that made him look permanently skeptical. His eyes, sharp and experienced, took in the scene in seconds, the splintered doorframe, the restrained intruders, the overturned furniture. Brooks had spent 25 years on the force, long enough to recognize when violence wasn't random. He nodded once to Ryan, a silent acknowledgement between men who understood the cost of preparation. then turned his attention to Lily, speaking gently, asking simple questions, grounding her back in the present. As the suspects were led away, handcuffed and subdued, another officer, Detective Maria Alvarez, arrived to assess the apartment. She was in her early 40s, lean and efficient, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. Alvarez knelt by the pantry, noticing a loose floorboard partially hidden beneath a bag of dog food Lily had bought for Diesel after the first incident. When the board was pried up, the truth emerged. Inside was a small, reinforced pouch containing uncut gemstones, their surfaces dull yet unmistakably valuable. The room fell quiet. The answer the bikers had been willing to kill for lay exposed in the pale light of dawn. Alvarez explained it plainly. The previous tenant of Lily's apartment had been linked to a jewel theft ring operating out of state. When he vanished, he left behind evidence and temptation. The bikers had not chosen Lily by chance. They believed she was the key to recovering their lost payment. Lily listened, numb, realizing how close she had lived to someone else's unfinished crimes. By the time the sun crested the skyline, neighbors gathered in the hallway, drawn by the noise and the relief of survival. Someone passed around paper cups of hot tea. Another offered a coat. Martha Collins, seated in a rolling chair with her ankle propped up from an old sprain, held court like a proud matriarch. She embellished details with the confidence of someone who had witnessed history firsthand, her voice warm and triumphant. Laughter broke through the tension, mingling with tears as the building transformed from a collection of closed doors into a shared space of gratitude and connection. Later that morning, as officers wrapped up their reports, Ryan received the call he had been expecting. He stepped aside near the stairwell, phone pressed to his ear, his expression unreadable. When he returned, Lily could see the shift in him, a familiar weight settling back onto his shoulders. His leave paperwork had finally cleared. He was required to report out of state within 24 hours to finalize his veteran benefits and relocation. It was not a choice. It was a closing chapter he had postponed long enough. They spoke quietly near the elevator, the hum of the building returning to normal around them. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a spare collar from Diesel's harness, black nylon worn smooth at the edges, the metal clasp scratched from years of use. He placed it gently in Lily's hands. "This isn't a souvenir," he said. "It's a promise. You did everything right. You trusted your instincts. Don't forget that." Lily closed her fingers around the collar, the weight of it steadying her. She tried to speak, but words failed, so she nodded, eyes bright. Diesel rose then and stepped forward, pressing his broad head against Lily's thigh. Up close, she noticed the faint gray dusting his muzzle, the sign of a working dog entering maturity, and the quiet intelligence in his eyes. He looked back once toward Ryan, then returned his gaze to Lily as if imprinting the moment. A bond formed not from ownership, but from shared survival. As Ryan prepared to leave, the hallway looked the same as it always had. Beige walls, worn carpet, the soft ding of the elevator. But Lily felt different standing there. She was steadier. The fear that had once hollowed her out now felt like a lesson learned, rather than a wound reopened. Winter still pressed against the windows, and danger had not vanished from the world. But she understood now that courage could be practiced, taught, and shared. Ryan paused at the doors, gave a small, almost smile, and left. Diesel glanced back once more before following, amber eyes meeting Lily's in a silent promise. When the elevator doors closed, the hallway fell quiet again. Lily stood alone, but not lonely, holding the collar, breathing in the calm that followed survival, knowing that hope sometimes stepped out when you least expected it, and that it could stay. As this story comes to a close, it leaves us with a quiet reminder that miracles don't always arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they walk out of an elevator in a worn green jacket. Sometimes they stand beside us on four steady legs, watching when the world turns its back. Many of us go through our days believing we are alone, carrying fears we never speak out loud, walking hallways we pray will stay peaceful. Yet again and again, God shows us that we are seen, that help can arrive at the exact moment we think hope is gone. In our everyday lives, we may never face the same danger as Lily, but we all know what it feels like to be afraid, to feel cornered by circumstances, illness, loneliness, or grief. This story is a reminder that God often sends protection through ordinary people, through quiet courage, through loyalty, and through love that asks for nothing in return. What some call coincidence, others recognize as grace. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who may need reassurance today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from or what this story made you feel. And if you believe, even just a little, that goodness still moves through this world, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and become part of our community. May God watch over you and your loved ones. May He place guardians in your path when you least expect them, and may you never walk alone through the dark. God bless you all.